The alarm sounded across the bridge of the human ship called Indomitable. Captain Minho looked up from his reports as the communications officer turned toward him with wide eyes. "Hey, sir, we have a distress signal." "It's coming from inside the Tauran Nebula." Minho stood up quickly. The Tauran Nebula was known throughout the galaxy as a death trap. No ship that entered it ever came back out. The radiation storms were so powerful they could melt through the strongest shields. The gravity wells inside could crush a vessel into dust.
Who is it?
Minho asked. "A colony ship called Luminous Hope. They're carrying Valari refugees. 40,000 of them." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew about the Valari. Their home planet was dying, slowly consumed by their sun's expansion. They had been fleeing for months, looking for a new world to call home. The Valari were fragile creatures, nothing like humans. They looked like large moths with delicate wings and soft bodies. They needed specific air to breathe and could only survive in low gravity. "How long do they have?" Minho asked. The communications officer checked the data. 72 hours of life support remaining. Their engines are completely dead. They're trapped. Minho pulled up the distress call on the main screen. He could hear the fear in the Valari captain's voice, even through the translator. They knew they were going to die. They were just hoping someone would hear them, would remember them. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was receiving the same message. The Council was made up of all the major species in known space. The Thurai were beings made of living crystal who valued logic above all else. The Bendari lived underwater and had the best medical technology in the galaxy. The Vrin were like giant insects who worked as one mind. Dozens of other species sat on the council, each one representing billions of lives. They met in emergency session to discuss the Velar situation. One by one, representatives stood and explained why a rescue was impossible. The Thurai representative spoke first. "We have analyzed the nebula. The radiation levels would kill our people in minutes. Our crystalline structure cannot withstand such exposure." The Bendari representative agreed. "Our ships are designed for deep space travel, but the gravity anomalies in the nebula would tear our vessels apart. We calculate a 0% chance of survival." The Vren collective hummed as one voice. "We have sent probes into the Tauran Nebula before. None returned. We will not sacrifice our people for an impossible task." Species after species stood and said the same thing. The rescue could not be done. The mathematics were clear. The physics were undeniable. To attempt a rescue would only add more deaths to the tragedy. Finally, the council voted. It was unanimous. They would send messages of sympathy to the Valari. They would honor their memory. But they would not attempt a rescue. On the Indomitable, Lieutenant Yuna brought the council's decision to Minho. She was his second in command, skilled officer who had served with him for 5 years. She pulled up the data on her screen. "The council has officially declared the rescue impossible," she said. "Every major species agrees. The Thurai say the radiation would liquefy their bodies. The Bendari say the gravity would crush their ships. The Vren say their probes never came back from that nebula." Minho studied the screen carefully. He looked at the radiation readings, the gravity maps, the energy storms. Everything the council said was true. The Tauran Nebula was death. "What about us?" he asked quietly. Yuna blinked. "Sir, what about humans? Can we survive it?" Yuna quickly ran calculations on her computer. Other crew members turned to listen. Engineer Taiho came up from the engine room, curious about what was happening. "Let me check our shield capacity," Taiho said, working on his own screen. He ran numbers, checked specifications, and compared the nebula's dangers against human technology. After several minutes, he looked up with a strange expression on his face. "It would be hell, Captain. Our shields can handle the radiation, but barely. We would all get sick from exposure. The gravity wells would shake us apart. Navigation would be nearly impossible with all the interference, but can we do it?" Minho pressed. Taiho slowly smiled, though it looked grim. "Maybe. We're built tougher than most species. Our ships have stronger hulls because Earth has higher gravity. Our shields are more robust because our sun throws more radiation. We might survive long enough to reach them and get back out." Yuna asked. That's the hard part, Taiho admitted. We would be damaged. Probably badly. But yes, I think we could make it. Minho looked around his bridge. He saw his crew watching him, waiting for his decision. These were good people. They had families back home, dreams for the future. He was asking them to risk everything for strangers. He reached for the ship-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every corridor and room on the Indomitable. All hands, this is Captain Minho speaking. We have just received word that 40,000 Valari refugees are trapped in the Tauran Nebula. Their life support is failing. They have less than 3 days to live. The Galactic Council has voted to abandon them. Every major species in the galaxy says a rescue is impossible. He paused, letting his words sink in. But we're from Earth, we're humans. We survived ice ages and plagues. We climbed out of caves and built cities. We split the atom and touched the stars. Our entire history is doing things others said were impossible. Minho looked at Yuna, at Taiho, at every face on the bridge. I'm not ordering anyone to come. This is volunteer only. If you want to leave, the shuttles are ready. No one will think less of you. But I'm going into that nebula. Who's with me? Not a single person moved toward the shuttles. Instead, Taiho turned back to his engineering station. We'll start prepping the engines for heavy radiation shielding. Yuna sat down at her station, setting course for the Tauran Nebula. Around the ship, every crew member returned to their posts. Not one person left. Minho nodded once, pride filling his chest. Then let's go save some lives. The Indomitable turned away from safe space and pointed its nose toward the swirling death of the Tauran Nebula. The Indomitable crossed the boundary into the Tauran Nebula. And immediately, everything went wrong. Alarms screamed across every deck. The ship shook so violently that crew members had to grip their stations to stay standing. Red emergency lights flashed as radiation poured through the shields like water through a broken dam. Hull integrity dropping to 87%, Yuna shouted over the noise. Her fingers flew across her console, trying to compensate for the damage. Radiation levels are 3 times higher than predicted. Captain Minho held onto his chair as the ship bucked beneath him. Can the shields hold? For now, Taiho answered from engineering. But every second we're in here, we're taking damage. I'm rerouting power to strengthen the forward shields. Medical Officer Hannah's voice came through the communication system. Captain, I'm reading elevated radiation exposure across all decks. I'm distributing anti-radiation medicine to everyone, but we need to limit our time in here. Understood, Minho said. Jiwan, how's navigation? Navigation Officer Jiwan stared at her screens with frustration. The interference is worse than expected. The nebula is scrambling our sensors. I can barely see 50 meters ahead. There are gravity wells everywhere, and they keep moving. The ship suddenly lurched to the left, throwing several crew members to the floor. Pilot Doyon wrestled with the controls, his knuckles white from gripping so hard. Gravity well just appeared right in front of us, he said through clenched teeth. These things are popping up with no warning. Outside the ship, the nebula swirled with violent colors. Purple and green radiation storms crashed against the hull. Space itself seemed to bend and twist around them. In the distance, massive gravity wells pulled at asteroids and debris, crushing them into nothing, far away in the safe regions of space. The Galactic Council watched through long-range sensors. They could barely track the Indomitable through all the interference. But they could see enough to know the human ship was being battered. They're taking massive damage, a Thurai observer reported. Hull integrity is declining rapidly. Radiation exposure is approaching lethal levels for most species. How long before they turn back? Another council member asked. They're not turning back. They're going deeper. Silence fell over the council chambers. None of them could understand it. The logical choice was clear. The humans should retreat, save themselves. Instead, they pushed forward into greater danger. Aboard the Luminous Hope, the Valari huddled together in fear. Their beautiful ship, once full of light and hope, was now dark and cold. Life support was failing section by section. The air was getting thin. Parents held their children close, trying to comfort them even as their own hope faded. Colony leader Verena stood on the bridge of the dying ship, watching the screens with tired eyes. She had accepted death. She had prepared her people for the end. There was a certain peace in knowing it would be over soon. Then their communications officer, Dietmar, suddenly sat up straight. "Leader Verena, I'm picking up something." A signal cutting through the interference. "What kind of signal?" Verena asked, not daring to hope. Dietmar adjusted the controls, his delicate fingers trembling. A voice came through the speakers, rough and filled with static, but clear enough to understand. "This is Captain Minho of the human vessel, Indomitable. We're coming to get you. Hold on." Verena stared at the translator in shock. "Humans. The Deathworlders are coming for us." She knew about humans, of course. Everyone in the galaxy did. They were the newest species to join galactic civilization only 50 years ago. Their planet Earth was classified as a death world, a place so hostile that most aliens needed full environmental suits just to visit the surface. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent. Even the plants and animals were dangerous. "Why would they come?" Verena whispered. "They barely know us." Dietmar brought up tracking data on the screens. "They're already halfway through the nebula. Leader, they're really coming." Hope, terrible and bright, flared in Verena's chest. But with it came fear. They'll die trying to reach us. This nebula kills everything. Back on the Indomitable, the crew was fighting for every meter of progress. Doyon navigated through a maze of gravity anomalies, his reflexes pushed to their absolute limit. Several times, the ship came within meters of being pulled into a crushing gravity well. I'm remember on a Bedford and Bedford and Depper and We're already at maximum, Taiho replied. "If I push them any harder, they'll burn out." A massive gravity well appeared directly ahead, larger than anything they had encountered. It was strong enough to trap a moon. The pull was so intense that nearby debris was being stretched like taffy before being crushed into atoms. "We can't go around it," Jawan said, panic creeping into her voice. "It's too big, and we don't have time. The Valari only have 58 hours left." Minho studied the gravity well on the screen. There was a narrow corridor between the well and a nearby radiation storm. It was barely wider than their ship. One wrong move, and they would be destroyed. "We go through," he decided. "Captain, that's suicide," Yuna protested. "So is turning back," Minho said firmly. "Doyen, can you thread that needle?" The pilot looked at the gap, calculating angles and speeds in his head. "If I had perfect conditions, maybe. But with the ship damaged and the gravity pulling at us, I'd say we have a 10% chance." 10% is better than 0, Minho said. "Do it." Doyon took a deep breath and gripped the controls. "I need every bit of power we have." Taiho made a decision that would save them all, though it nearly killed everyone in the process. Diverting power from life support. "We can survive without air for 20 minutes. The Valari can't." The lights dimmed throughout the ship. The air circulation stopped. Everything went silent except for the hum of the engines building to maximum power. "Here we go," Doyon whispered. The Indomitable shot forward, racing toward the tiny gap. The gravity well pulled at them, trying to drag them into destruction. The ship groaned and screamed as metal bent under the stress. Hull plates cracked. Warning alarms sounded everywhere. Doyon flew like he had never flown before. His hands moved faster than thought, making tiny adjustments every fraction of a second. The ship tilted, rolled, and twisted through the gap. The gravity well pulled so hard that half the crew blacked out from the GI forces. Then, with a final burst of thrust that felt like a giant hand crushing everyone into their seats, they broke through. "We're clear," Giwan gasped. Blood trickling from her nose. "Restoring life support," Taiho said weakly. Air rushed back into the ship. Lights flickered back on. Crew members helped each other stand up, checking for injuries. "Visual contact with the Luminous Hope," Guan reported. 12 kilometers and closing. On the view screen, they could finally see the Valari colony ship. It looked beautiful and fragile, like a piece of art floating in the deadly nebula, but it was also clearly dying. Parts of it were dark, debris floated around it. Minho stood up, even though his body screamed in protest. "All hands, prepare for rescue operations. We're going to save every single one of them." The Indomitable pulled alongside the Luminous Hope, and immediately the crew saw the problem. The two ships were completely different in design. The Valari ship was built for comfort and low gravity, with delicate docking ports that looked like they would break if touched too hard. The human ship was built for strength and survival. With heavy reinforced docking clamps, Lieutenant Yuna ran compatibility tests and shook her head. "Captain, we can't dock with them. The ports don't match. If we try to force it, we'll tear their hull open." Engineer Taiho studied the designs. "Even if we could dock, their corridors are too narrow. A human in a protective suit wouldn't fit through their passages. We'd get stuck trying to evacuate them." Captain Minho stared at the Valari ship, thinking hard. 40,000 lives were right there, just meters away. But the radiation in the nebula was so intense that any gap between the ships would let it flood in. The Valari would die in seconds if exposed to it. "Then we do it the hard way," Minho decided. "We go outside." The bridge fell silent. Going outside the ship in this environment was insane. The radiation would burn through their suits. The gravity wells would tear them apart. But there was no other choice. Within minutes, volunteers suited up in the cargo bay. Yuna led one team. Taiho led another. They put on the heaviest radiation suits available, knowing it wouldn't be enough. The suit's computer systems immediately started showing warnings about the external environment. Predicted survival time in these conditions, one computer read out loud. 108 minutes before lethal radiation exposure. "Less than 2 hours," Yuna said quietly. "We'll have to work fast." They locked magnetic boots onto the hull and stepped out into the nebula. The radiation was so intense they could see it crackling across their helmet visors. The gravity wells pulled at them, trying to rip them away into space. But they held on and moved toward the Luminous Hope. Taiho carried plasma cutting torches. "We're going to make our own entrance, just like humans have always done." They attached to the Valari ship's hull and began cutting. The metal was soft compared to human ship armor, designed for elegance rather than warfare. The torches bit through it quickly. Behind them, more human crew members brought portable force field generators inside the Luminous Hope. The Valari watched in amazement. They saw armored figures cutting through their hull from outside. At first, they were terrified, thinking they were being attacked. Then they realized what was happening. The humans were creating new airlocks. Verena rushed to the nearest breach point. She watched as humans set up a shimmering force field to hold the atmosphere in. Then one of the humans stepped through, removing their helmet inside the protected area. It was Yuna. She was smaller than Verena expected. Most species in the galaxy were larger than humans. But there was something in Yuna's eyes, a fierce determination that made her seem much bigger. "We're here to evacuate you," Yuna said through her translator. "We need to move quickly. Can you help organize your people?" Verena nodded, unable to speak. She had never expected to see rescue. She had made peace with death. Now these strange Deathworlders were tearing through her ship to save her people. The evacuation began. Humans would enter the Luminous Hope, gather as many Valari as they could carry, and bring them back through the makeshift airlocks to the Indomitable. Each human could carry 2 Valari at a time because the fragile aliens weighed almost nothing. Medical officer. Hannah had converted the cargo bay into a refugee center. As terrified Valari poured in, she worked to stabilize the most critical cases. The Valari biology was completely different from human biology, but Hannah adapted quickly. She used her medical scanners to figure out their vital signs and adjusted treatment accordingly. They need low gravity and specific atmospheric conditions. Hannah called out to her medical team. Adjust the gravity generators in sections 3 through 7. Change the air mixture to match their needs. Young Valari children clutched their parents, their large eyes wide with fear. Human crew members tried to comfort them, speaking softly even though the translators made their words sound mechanical. Outside, the rescue teams worked non-stop. The radiation was burning through their suits faster than expected. Several crew members collapsed but were dragged back to the ship by their teammates. Fresh volunteers took their places. Then Yuna discovered a serious problem. An entire section of the luminous Hope had become structurally unstable. The metal was cracking from the nebula's stress. 3,000 Valari were trapped inside that section. "We need to seal it off," one of her team members said. "It's too dangerous. That section could collapse any second."
"Ow!"
Yuna said firmly. "We don't leave anyone behind." She led her team into the unstable section. Even as the metal groaned around them, they could see cracks spreading across the walls. Pieces of the ceiling were falling. But 3,000 Valari were huddled inside. Too frightened to move, Yuna grabbed spare hull plating from the Indomitable and began reinforcing the weakest points. Her team worked alongside her, welding plates into place while the structure trembled. It was like trying to repair a building while it was falling down. Tejo monitored from the Indomitable, watching the structural integrity numbers drop. "Yuna, the section is at 12% integrity. You need to get out of there now." "Not until everyone is safe," Yuna replied, her voice strained. She and her team guided the Valari out in groups, running through corridors that were collapsing. Into twisted metal, Yuna landed hard on the Indomitable's deck, breathing heavily. Her suit was cracked in 3 places. Radiation burns marked her neck and hands, but she was smiling. "Everyone's out," she reported. After 8 brutal hours of work, all 40,000 Valari were aboard the Indomitable. The ship that was designed for a crew of 800 now held 50 times that number. Valari filled every cargo bay, every corridor, every spare room. Some even slept in the shuttle bays. Minho walked through the crowded corridors, seeing his crew exhausted but proud. They had done the impossible. They had saved everyone. On the view screen, the luminous Hope finally gave up its fight. The beautiful ship broke apart, consumed by the nebulous forces. Pieces of it scattered into the swirling radiation storms. Verena watched her ship die and felt tears roll down her face. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. Her people were alive because of these strange, stubborn Deathworlders. Minho turned to his crew. "Now comes the hard part. We need to get home." The journey into the nebula had damaged them badly. The journey out would be even worse. But looking at his crew, seeing their determination despite their exhaustion, Minho knew they would make it. They had come too far to fail now. The return journey through the Tauren Nebula was worse than anyone had imagined. The Indomitable, carrying 50 times its design capacity, limped through the radiation storms like a wounded animal. Every system was stressed beyond its limits. Every crew member was sick from radiation exposure. "Hull integrity at 52%, Lieutenant Yuna reported. Her voice was weak and blood dripped from her nose onto her console. "We have microfractures on 3 decks. If we hit another gravity well like before, the ship will break apart." Captain Minho looked at the navigation charts with Officer Giwan. Every possible route out of the nebula was marked in red, indicating extreme danger. There was no safe path. There never had been. "What's the shortest route?" Minho asked. Daji 1 pointed to a path that went straight through the most violent part of the nebula. "This one. But Captain, the radiation levels are twice what we experienced coming in. And there are at least 5 major gravity wells in our way." "How long?" "If we take this route, we could be out in 6 hours. Any other route would take 12 to 15 hours. Minho looked around his bridge. His crew was dying slowly. Most of them showed visible signs of radiation sickness. Hair was falling out. Skin was pale and covered in burns. Some crew members had collapsed at their stations but refused to leave their posts. We take the shortest route, he decided. We don't have 12 hours. Deep in the engineering section, Taiho worked on keeping the engines running. His hands shook from radiation poisoning as he manually rerouted power. The computers kept showing warnings that he ignored. His body was shutting down, but he refused to stop. Verena found him there, slumped over a control panel but still working. Radiation burns covered his neck and arms, visible even through his uniform. "You're dying," she said softly. Taiho looked up and gave her a weak smile. "Not yet. Still got work to do?" "Why?" Verena asked. "Why are you killing yourselves for us? We're strangers. You owe us nothing." Taiho thought about the question for a moment. "Where I come from, on Earth, we have a saying. We're all in this together. The galaxy might see different species, different civilizations, but we just see people who need help." He returned to his work, and Verena watched him in silence. She had lived for 200 years, had studied countless civilizations, but she had never encountered a species quite like humans. They didn't calculate acceptable losses. They didn't choose logic over compassion. They simply refused to accept that some lives mattered less than others. On the bridge, pilot Doyon spotted something on the sensors that made his blood run cold. A gravity anomaly was forming ahead, bigger than anything they had seen. It was massive, strong enough to capture a small planet. "Captain, we have a problem," Doyon said quietly. "There's a gravity well forming in our path. It's enormous." Minho studied the readings. "Can we go around it?" "Not in our condition. We're too damaged, and it would add hours to our journey." "Can we push through it?" Doyon ran the calculations and then shook his head. "No, we don't have enough power. The gravity would tear us apart." The bridge fell into heavy silence. They had come so far. They had saved everyone. But now, it seemed they would all die together, just kilometers from safety. Then Doyon saw something. A possibility so dangerous it barely counted as a plan. "Captain, I could slingshot us around it. Use the gravity to accelerate our exit from the nebula." "It's brilliant," Yuna said. Then she saw Doyun's expression. "What's the problem?" "The J-force is," Doyon said quietly. "To achieve enough speed, we would have to whip around the gravity well at incredible velocity. The Volari might survive it in the cargo bays with all the cushioning. But us? In our current condition, with radiation sickness and injuries?" He trailed off. Everyone understood what he wasn't saying. The maneuver would probably kill the human crew, but it would save the Volari. Minho looked at his crew. These brave people had followed him into hell without hesitation. They had risked everything for strangers. Now he was asking them to give even more. Yuna spoke first. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, but her voice was steady. "We didn't come this far to fail, Captain." Around the bridge, crew members nodded. Not one person protested. They had made their choice long ago when they decided to enter the nebula. "All hands," Minho announced over the ship's communication system. "Secure the Valaria in the cargo bays. Use every cushion, every blanket, every piece of padding we have. Strap them down in cargo netting. Make sure they're protected." Human crew members rushed through the ship, helping Volari into the safest positions. They wrapped the fragile aliens in protective materials, secured them carefully. Many Volari wept, understanding what was about to happen. "Why are you doing this?" One young Volari asked a human crew member. The human, a woman named Suji from the medical team, smiled gently. "Because someone has to. Might as well be us." When all the Volari were secured, the human crew took their positions. They strapped themselves into their stations, knowing what was coming. Medical Officer Hannah distributed what little pain medication remained.
How?
"This is going to hurt," she warned. "More than anything you felt before. Your bodies are already damaged from radiation. This much G-force could break bones, burst blood vessels. Some of you might not wake up." "Then we better make this count," someone said, and others laughed weakly. Doyon's hands hovered over the controls. "Everyone ready?" "Do it," Minho ordered. The Indomitable dove toward the massive gravity well, accelerating to dangerous speeds. The ship began to shake as the gravity grabbed them. Then Doyen executed the slingshot maneuver. The world became pain. Gorses crushed everyone into their seats with the weight of mountains. Bones cracked like dry wood. Blood vessels burst under the pressure. Crew members screamed, but couldn't hear themselves over the roaring in their ears. Minho felt his ribs break. His vision turned red, then black. But he stayed conscious through sheer will, watching the screens. Making sure they stayed on course, Yuna's arms snapped in two places. But she kept her other hand on her console, monitoring the hull integrity as it dropped to critical levels. Teho, deep in engineering, felt his spine compress. Pain like fire shot through his body, but he kept the engines running, kept the power flowing. The ship whipped around the gravity well at impossible speeds, using the massive force to fling them toward the edge of the nebula. Metal screamed. Systems failed, but the Indomitable held together through the determination of its crew. Then, suddenly they broke free. The Tauran Nebula released them, spitting them out into clear space. The crushing G-forces stopped. The ship coasted forward on momentum alone. On the bridge, no one moved. They were all unconscious or too injured to function. But they had made it. Waiting at the nebula's edge was an entire fleet of ships from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had assembled every medical vessel they had, waiting to witness either a miracle or a tragedy. What they saw was both. The battered Indomitable emerged from the Tauran Nebula, and the assembled fleet watched in stunned silence. The ship was barely recognizable. Its hull was scorched and cracked. Whole sections were missing. It looked like it should have broken apart hours ago, but it was still flying. And on board were 40,000 living Valar. Medical ships from every species raced toward the Indomitable. Thurai physicians, who had declared the rescue impossible, now mobilized their equipment with desperate speed. Bendari medical teams, possessing the finest healing technology in the galaxy, prepared their facilities. Vren medical drones swarmed the human ship inside. The human crew was scattered across their stations, unconscious or barely alive. Captain Minho was still strapped into his command chair, his body broken but his eyes watching the view screen until the last moment. Blood covered the bridge. Lieutenant Yuna had multiple fractures in both arms and several ribs. Her internal organs were damaged from the radiation and G-forces, but she had kept one hand on her console until they cleared the nebula. Engineer Taiho was found in the engineering section, collapsed over the engine controls. His body had absorbed enough radiation to kill most species 5 times over. His spine was compressed from the GI forces, but the engines were still running, still providing power to life support for the VAR. Layer medical teams carefully extracted the human crew, rushing them to the waiting hospital ships. Their eye doctors, working with technology that could rebuild crystalline bodies, struggled to adapt their methods to human flesh. Bendari physicians used their knowledge of complex biology to repair internal damage. Every species contributed their expertise. The Valari emerged from the cargo bays, shaken but alive. All 40,000 of them. Not a single life lost. Verena stood in the docking bay of a medical ship, watching as unconscious humans were carried past her on stretchers. These people had given everything to save her species. Many might not survive. All would bear permanent scars. A Thurai physician approached her. His crystalline body glowed with different colors as he spoke. "Leader Verena, your people are all safe. We are arranging transport to a suitable world for your colony." "And the humans?" she asked that the physician's glow dimmed slightly. "We are doing everything we can. Their injuries are severe. The radiation damage is extensive, but humans are remarkably resilient. We think most will survive, though they will need months of treatment." 6 months passed. The Velarai colony established their new home on a planet in human-controlled space. They named it Sanctuary, in honor of the species that had refused to let them die. The planet was perfect for their needs, with low gravity and gentle weather. In the center of their new capital city, the Valari built a monument. It showed a human in a radiation-scarred suit carrying a Valari child to safety. The inscription read simply, "They came when no one else would." Meanwhile, the crew of the Indomitable recovered slowly. Captain Minho spent 2 months in a Bendari medical facility, his body rebuilt one piece at a time. Yuna's bones healed, though she would always walk with a slight limp. Taiho's organs were repaired. But he would need medication for the rest of his life to counter the radiation damage. But they all survived. Every single crew member made it. When they were finally well enough to travel, the entire crew was summoned to the Galactic Council chambers. They had no idea what to expect. Humans were still newcomers to the galaxy, often viewed as reckless and primitive. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every known species. As Minho led his crew inside, walking carefully because his body still ached, something unprecedented happened. Thousands of aliens rose to their feet. The chamber erupted in a sound the translator couldn't quite capture. It was applause, but different for each species. The Thurai chimed like bells. The Bendari created harmonious waves of sound. The Vren hummed as one voice. Every species showed respect in their own way. Minho and his crew stood in shocked silence. The Thurai representative, a being of pure crystal who had voted against the rescue, descended from his platform and approached Minho directly. When he spoke, his voice filled the chamber. "Captain Minho, my civilization is millions of years old. We are founded on logic, mathematics, and self-preservation. When we analyzed the rescue of the Valari, we calculated the odds carefully. We determined it was impossible. We were mathematically correct." Thorai paused, and his crystalline body shifted to a deep blue color that their species used to show shame. "But we were morally wrong. You showed us that some equations cannot account for the human variable. You showed us that impossible is just a word, not an absolute truth. You showed us that we had become so focused on preserving ourselves that we forgot what we were supposed to be preserving: our compassion, our courage, our willingness to help those in need." The Bendari representative spoke next. "We have the finest medical technology in the galaxy. We can heal almost any wound, cure almost any disease, but we use our gifts only for ourselves and our allies. You taught us that our gifts mean nothing if we're not willing to risk ourselves to use them." One by one, representatives from different species stood and spoke. Each one acknowledged their failure and praised the humans for their courage. Finally, the council announced a new directive. They called it the Deathworlder Protocol. It stated that in any rescue situation deemed too dangerous for conventional response, humanity would be consulted first. Not because humans were expendable, but because they had proven that they saw possibilities where others saw only impossibilities. The council also announced that from this day forward, any species could request human assistance in emergency situations. In return, humanity would be given full membership in the council with voting rights, something that usually took centuries to achieve. Yuna leaned close to Minho and whispered, "They're calling us heroes." Minho shook his head slightly. "We just did what needed to be done." A soft voice spoke from behind them. "That is what makes you Deathworlders." They turned to see Verena approaching, her delicate wings shimmering in the chamber's light. Behind her, filling the galleries above, were 40,000 Valari. All of them had come to witness this moment. "You don't see yourselves as special," Verena continued. "You simply cannot comprehend abandoning those in need, no matter the cost. Your planet Earth made you strong enough to survive anything, but you chose to use that strength to save others. That choice defines you." She gestured to her people above. "We will never forget. Our children will learn your names. Our history will record your courage. And if you ever need us, we will come, even if it seems impossible." The human crew stood together, accepting the galaxy's gratitude with quiet dignity. They hadn't done it for glory or recognition. They had done it because it was right. Later, as the Indomitable prepared to depart the council station, now fully repaired and upgraded with the best technology the galaxy could offer, another distress call came through. A mining colony was trapped after an asteroid collision. Rescue teams from 3 different species had tried and failed. The situation was declared too dangerous to continue attempts. Minho looked at his crew on the bridge. Despite their injuries, despite everything they had been through, he saw determination in their eyes. "Well?" he asked. Yuna smiled despite her limp and her scars. "We're from Earth, Captain. We don't know when to quit." Doyon checked the navigation. "Setting course now." Taiho's voice came from engineering. "Engines ready. Let's go save some lives." The Indomitable turned toward the distress signal and accelerated. Behind them, the Galactic Council watched and felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, because now they understood. When disaster struck and civilized species calculated acceptable losses, there would always be someone who refused to accept those calculations. There would always be humans asking, why not? Instead of accepting impossible, the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. The most dangerous species wasn't the one to fear. It was the one to call when all hope was lost. And somewhere in space, a human crew answered that call. Again and again, because that's what humans do. They survive the unsurvivable. They attempt the impossible. And they never, ever leave anyone behind. The message spread across the galaxy, carried by every species to their home worlds. When the darkness comes and hope fades, remember, the Deathworlders are out there, flying toward danger while others flee from it, and they're coming to save you.